machine knitters. Let's talk yarn. One of my least favorite yarns to use on my knitting machine is the Sugars and Cream cotton yarns. These are in cakes, so they actually knit okay from the cakes, but cotton yarns do not stretch. So if you have a 100% cotton yarn, it's very difficult to knit on your machine. You can do it. I made this adorable little washcloth, which I can link the video tutorial down in the description for. This was okay to knit. It's just that it has no stretch, so you're going to want to be careful what you make out of cotton. So it can be done, but it's not my favorite thing to do. If we haven't met, I'm Danielle. I knit for my family and my 6 kids, and I like to share what I'm learning with all of you. So let's look at my favorite yarn. I just knit a hat with this Ferris wheel yarn, and this was so easy to knit from. I knit it from a center pull cake, and the yarn it's a worsted weight yarn, but it just flowed easy. It did what I wanted it to. I did a lot of manual manipulation on this yarn, and sometimes when you're doing that, you'll get lots of splitting in your yarn and stuff, and this did not do that. Like, I just thought it was so easy to knit from. I loved the way you didn't really know necessarily what colors were coming next, and it was just a really fun yarn to use. So I was really happy with the way that project turned out, and this was a really fun yarn to use. What's not a fun yarn to use? Velvet is not a fun yarn to use. It can be done, but you know, a lot of things that can be done maybe shouldn't be done. My daughter loved this yarn. We found it at Hobby Lobby. It's a Yarn Bee yarn, and I like a lot of the yarns. It's a number 4, it's a worsted weight, so it should not be terribly difficult to do on a bulky machine. I'm pretty sure I used a tension 10 on this. I'll get it nice and close so you can look at it. It knit okay, not great. I felt like I definitely had to have it up to 10, but maybe I'm thinking of something else. But the thing with this is that you cannot find the tension after you knit it. Like, you have to put in some markers and do some measurements and calculations. Like, you can't just go and knit this up and then count how many stitches and how many rows. It's not going to happen, because you literally cannot even see the different stitches. Like, you can kind of see the rows. This has been sitting around for a really long time because my daughter wants socks out of it, and I probably will still make socks. But yeah, this is one of those yarns that you can knit with it, but if you make a mistake, it's going to be really difficult to fix your mistake because it's so difficult to see the stitches in the rows. So that would be my main reason for really not necessarily liking this yarn. I probably won't be getting velvet yarn again. Another yarn that is super easy to knit with would be your sock yarns. Now, I really like the Patton's Croy socks. I can get them locally, local-ish. Our nearest big box stores are 45 minutes away to an hour, so they're not that local. I don't have any local yarn stores, and so I'm a little bit stuck with either ordering online or using big box stores. So I do get the Patton's Croy socks yarn. I love it. I like all of it. I like the wool as well. The worsted weight wool yarn knits really well. The Patton's worsted weight wool yarn knits really well. And so this is another of my go-to yarns that I will use mostly for socks. I haven't ever knit a sweater with it, but possibly someday. So before I show you my next yarn that I really don't like, let's talk about why yarn is so important in our machines. Now, generally, you want a yarn that's on a cone. If you have watched many machine knitting videos, most people have yarn on cones. So why does it have to be on a cone? Why do people like it on a cone? People like it on a cone because it freely pulls off. And when you're going really fast on a knitting machine, like, you can't have yarn that's getting stuck. So on a cone, it pulls off really easily. If you have it in a skein or even a hank, sometimes it's really easy for it to get knotted up, to jam, and just to not pull well. And that affects the tension of your work. So I knit from skeins all the time. I'm a little bit of a rebel. So, and I do that, I suppose, because it's easy for me to find skeins of yarn. They're readily available in the big box stores. I mostly use acrylic at this point in my knitting journey or my yarn journey. I do have a lot of this coned yarn on my wall, you can see behind me, but this is like 30 to 40 years old. A lot of it is still good and fine and works well, but some of it is not. Some of it breaks really easily, so I have to be careful what I use and what I don't. Some of it's going to end up always just being decoration. Some of it's just not that useful, and maybe I should get rid of it, so, you know. But I like using it as waste yarn too. So this came with my standard gauge machine. Someone was selling everything that they had for knitting machines as a big lot, and so that's why I have so much coned yarn. Now you can still get some cone yarn. I will put a couple links in the description. There's some tam yarn out there, and I do have tam yarn on a cone, and it is really nice yarn from what I've noticed. A lot of the yarn I have is heirloom. It's heirloom yarns, and they are really nice yarns. So that's why people are so concerned about yarn on a cone. So you can get yarn winders, you can rewind your yarn, you can wind it into cakes, because cakes generally are nice and easy to knit from, because usually your yarn pulls nicely right out of the center of a cake. You can also knit from the outside of the cake. It generally will knit well from the outside. You do still kind of need to make sure that it's loose and free flowing, and you need to watch for things getting stuck. My knitting area is not always completely clear of obstacles, so sometimes yarn gets tangled, and it's quite impressive what yarn can get tangled on that you wouldn't even think that that could happen. So let's look at my next least favorite yarn. I wanted to try out this Scarfy yarn. I actually bought quite a bit of it, and I am much less than impressed. It's okay. I feel like it had like a lot of knots in it. It was not free flowing the way you want your skeins of yarn to be. But here's what I made. I was attempting to make a sweater, but here's what I have. And I was careful to check things too, because I knew I was gonna have to line up like my colors and stuff. So I made sure that, like, I wrote down like how many orange were there and how many gray, and then orange and gray, and then I got to this spot that didn't really change here. And this was all one skein of yarn, so I think somewhere here there must have been a knot. I probably put it on the edge. So then that just made this come out like not very nice. I just didn't like the way the pattern ended up because of this interesting tiny stripe in the middle. And even if you were making a scarf, I wouldn't really have wanted it to end up like that either. So since I wanted to make a sweater, it was even worse. So that's just my opinion on the Scarfy yarns if you've been looking at them. Okay, so let's talk about another one of my favorite yarns. I really do like the Yarn Bee yarns. These come from Hobby Lobby. we finally got one near us, again in that like 45 to an hour away, but we just don't have much options for yarn around here. So this is the Soft and Sleek DK, sorry that's backwards, and then this is the Yarntopia. I love both of these. The projects that I've done with them have turned out really well. They are super soft. Here's one started project. So this is a sweater. You can tell I like this color. But this is a tuck sweater. And then I think the ribbon comes out nice on them. So I really like them. And then here's another one that I had started, and then I think I changed this one. So here's another one pattern that I might release eventually, but I really like the way that turned out. And then I did a fancy rib on the bottom. I had a time where I was playing around with some fancy ribs, and I really like the way that turned out. So hopefully I will get that finished and share with you guys. So the next yarn that I probably won't be buying again is this Secret Soft yarn. This is what I used for my 4-color sweater, that the Secret Soft Quartet sweater that came out most recently. And the yarn is really nice, like it's a nice soft yarn, but it is super splitty. So that's really my only disagreement with this yarn. There weren't knots in it. It flows freely. It's nice and soft, but it is super splitty, and sometimes you just find that. I do really like Karen's Simply Soft yarns, but they are splitty as well. So if you're doing something like, especially if you were doing something with a garter bar, you would not want to use yarn that is on its own kind of splitty to begin with. So let me show you one more yarn that is one of my favorites. I made a ton of these slippers with it. So these are, I don't remember what I called these. There's slipper socks, I think. I knit these flat, but I think my video actually shows them being knit long, with 2 seams. You can't even, like, you can hardly see the seams in these. They're just, I don't know, they're super cool. They're nice and cozy, and they're really nice on a cold night. So these were made from Premier Puzzle Yarn, and I did this on my bulky machine because this is a number 5, I believe. Yeah, this is a bulky yarn to begin with, but it worked really well on my machine. I think I only had my tension at like 7 or 8, so it's not like it was too bulky. It's interesting because sometimes you can get away with a number 5 weight yarn. These are US measurements, but and sometimes you can't. So you just kind of need to play around with some of them to figure out if they'll work well in bulky machines or not. But this comes in all kinds of colors. We actually recently found this on clearance at Walmart, and so I got a couple more skeins. My son loved this green color, so he wants a blanket. So maybe you guys will see a blanket on my channel coming up soon as well. So I have missed making videos for you guys, and I'm hoping to continue getting them up on YouTube and doing all the machine knitting things. So I would love to know what your favorite or least favorite yarns are as well, and what you would tell beginners about starting with their first yarns. So thanks so much for watching, and make sure to give your knitting machine some love this week.